undergrad as an Afro-Am major.
Really? Oh yeah, they have
And loved it. And loved it. And it was a cool, I mean, just to be in that kind of Pioneer Valley and, go to concerts at on, Pearl Street and Northampton, and go to, Hampshire lectures, and I took this incredible African studies colloquium course at Amherst that was taught by different professors at different colleges. And it was just a cool place to go to college.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, I loved it actually. So did you ever take any of the classes in the SJE program? Well, what years were you there? When were you there?
I was there 2003 to 2007.
Okay, so I left in 2005. So so did you ever take any of the weekend courses, the SJE, like the
No,
freshman courses? No?
no,
Okay.
at UMass I was a STEPIC major, which was social
Oh,
thought and
STEPIC.
political.
Oh, that was such a great major. Yeah. Yeah. Those are always my favorite students when I have STEPIC students in my class. I taught Education 210 was the required classes, and whenever I'd get a STEPIC student. Wow.
Well, Sherry, we need to connect offline. I'd
Oh,
love to learn more
yeah.
about your work.
I'm
And,
like, Julie, you didn't have an agenda or anything, did you? Right? Like Aaron and I are just connecting here. We got all kinds
we're
of
just
stuff.
going to record our individual conversation for But
oh my goodness.
Julie, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, you have met Sherry, you have met me. So I'm just going to ask if Camilla, can you unmute and just introduce yourself?
We're not recording anymore, right?
We are.
Oh, we are?
Yeah.
Oh no, edit that out.
Hey.
Edit what out? What did you?
I know.
No. Hi, Camilla Souza, Hokupa'a. Since it is recording, I'm going to leave my video off because things are a little bit of a mess behind me. I'm rearranging my home office space. Not actively at this moment. I am watching the meeting. Program coordinator for Hokupa'a. We're West Hawaii based partnership of different organizations. We do a lot around trying to get different actors that work around anything to do with positive youth outcomes together. Trying to focus lately on moving forward with systems change within the education system. Awesome. And all the systems that tie into it. So it's a big job, and I've really appreciated the insight that I've gotten from the transformational learning stream. And happy for you to be here. I primarily work with the public schools because those are our big partners. So it's nice to have perspective from somebody I haven't. So welcome.
It's nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to ask if you were familiar with Hokupa'a.
I am. So I'm the programs director and for Nalukai Foundation as well. And I'm the startup camp director for the Nalukai Startup Camp, which happens every summer. And so it's been really cool to find out about organizations like yours and so many others that are in a really similar space. And the power of Nalukai is its public-private charter, that it really tries to live diversity, equity, and inclusion by having incredible cohorts from all parts of the islands. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
So let's just start by, so Aaron, you kind of have two positions that are both interesting to us. So as far as transformational learning goes. So could you just kind of talk a little bit about each one, both at HPA doing capstones, and then with Nalukai and creating that's really kind of from the beginning. So could you just share a little bit about each of those?
Totally. I'll start with HPA. It's a dream job. I'm gonna have my son roll through in just a second.
Okay.
Hi, Kainoa. Can you say hi?
Hi, Kainoa.
So I'm the K-12 capstone coordinator at HPA, Hawaii Preparatory Academy in Waimea. I'm currently on its campus. We live on the campus, and my wife is the director of student affairs at the school. My job is really beautiful because I get to look at the academic identity of an institution and have it be rooted in student agency and have it be rooted in kind of deeper learning. And so at HPA, capstones occur in 5th, 8th, and 12th grade. And that's really exciting because you get to build the learning targets and skills and capacities needed K4 to 5, 6, 7 to 8, 9, 10, 11 to 12. And that's a part of the journey that I currently find myself on. We launched capstones last year in 2020 for seniors. And that was a really hard thing to do
Yeah.
as we shifted to distance learning in Q4. But it was the most powerful experience I've ever had as an educator, because our students, many of whom had physical products in their senior capstone, had to pivot, a word that we all hear too much of in 2020, in really beautiful and remarkable ways. And what occurred over the student capstone showcase was something I never thought I would see in education. The power of it being virtual was that we recorded everything.
Yeah.
We pivoted and we shifted our presentations to be 7 to 10 minute pre-recorded videos, because we felt anything over Zoom that's live is going to be fraught with awkwardness and pauses and bad Wi-Fi. But we had live Q&As. And what that did was it grew our learning community massively. We had Kapuna, we had Kumu, we had family members and grandparents from all over the world. We had educational entrepreneurs. We had people from Kamehameha schools on different campuses. We had entrepreneurs from all over the world bear witness to students getting their visions and passion and mission out into the world. And that was really powerful. And to get to see that in 8th grade and 5th grade was special too. But I think, you know, what makes our program unique is like Pualani Lincoln and the other Hawaiian cultural practitioners that root our work in sense of place, that allow us to create and make impact and take kind of the science and knowledge of Hawaii and Hawaiians and make that a part of our program. And you know, this ethos of makahana ka'ike, by doing one learns, is really the definition of our program. It's just essentially modern day craftsmanship. And so I think sometimes we get wrapped up in quoting Eric Ries and lean startup methodology and trying to seem like we're super smart. And we're taking Silicon Valley lessons and applying them in different places. But like when you just look at that statement, makahana ka'ike, it's really all of that, you know, in a much more sustainable and an easy way to do it. And I think, you know, there was something that Pua did. We have these workshops, capstone workshops across seniors, and she did one on kind of sense of place and how we make our products and our work rooted in Hawaii. And she told this story of Pele and Hi'iaka. Pele sends her sister on this mission, and Hi'iaka comes back needing more information. And Pele says to her, "Go, comma, the sustenance you need lies ahead." And that comma for me makes that statement kind of like a clarion call or a call to action. And that's become our, you know, culture and our mantra for this year, that when youth get their ideas out into the world, and even if they're the small versions of those ideas, they make an impact and they can learn from them.
So now share a little bit about Nalukai. And
Sure.
I have questions, but in our last conversation, we didn't actually, you know, move on to Nalukai very much. So I want to make sure that I do that this time.
Yeah, totally. So HPA is beautiful because it's a year-long laboratory space. We get to see what this work looks like over the course of the year. Nalukai is 2 weeks, and pre-COVID was boarding. So Nalukai was founded by Darius Bubba Monsef, a Parker School graduate, and not meant for formal education. Kind of went to a not great university in New England, flunked out, but really understood the concepts of, you know, hustle, and I think took the privilege that he had and turned it into Color Lovers and Creative Market, which were 2 cool digital marketplaces. And Bubs wanted to give back to this community. He wanted to create this community, this, you know, this hui of youth that if they left would have something to come back to. And it was all about community. And Nalukai has transformed into a really powerful social and cultural entrepreneurship program for youth across the islands of Hawaii. And its diversity in race, socioeconomics, life experience, all of that has made it super powerful and unique. And the fact that it's intensive, that it's boarding, made it really easy to set that culture. But last year, just like at HPA, I took the learning lessons of the HPA Capstone Showcase and working with incredible facilitators, Pua again, David Clark, Austin Stewart, Chris Recamp. We created a really powerful 2-week virtual program, again, rooted in student agency, having these cohorts, 24 students from around the islands, redesign it with us on the fly as needs were there. And so Nalukai has turned into this other really beautiful laboratory space of what it looks like in an intensive atmosphere to be able to give youth not just the skills, not just the tools. The program is free. Every student gets a MacBook Pro to keep. And also last year, because we were virtual, we made sure that everyone had internet access, and where they didn't, we got them internet access. But we give them a network. We give them a network of mentors from all over Hawaii and the world, but way more importantly, we give them a network of youth, right? And so now a student from Punahou is partnered with a student at Molokai High School, with a student at Honaka'a, with a student at Halakumana, and those relationships continue. And so that to us, taking that, Vygotsky idea of zone of proximal development, right? Getting youth to partner with each other, that's been a beautiful learning lesson. And so I think the cool part of HPA and Nalukai is that they just flow into each other. The learning lessons from one flow into the back and forth and back and forth. And so I've been deeply privileged to kind of find my purpose and calling as an educator over the past couple of years.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask the first question and then I want to kind of open it up. So one of the things that you emphasize a lot and are clearly passionate about is student agency. Can you talk a little bit about how that changes student engagement and student learning?
So all relationships are built around trust and trustworthiness and truthfulness. And when you create a system where youth trust you, where youth trust the mentors that you bring in, and then most importantly, trust themselves, that's where student agency can occur. And so, after doing this for 6 years, it's remarkable to me how hard it is to get youth from all walks of life and all levels of privilege to believe in themselves, to have confidence in themselves, to believe they belong, that they're worthy of getting their ideas out into the world. And so everything we do at Nalukai is about building that in, and you can call it DEI, you can call it SEL, but at its core, it's just getting people to believe in themselves. And there's so much data and information. It's a great essay by Paul Graham from Y Combinator about that's where great startups and ideas come from. They come from people who are uniquely suited to solve a problem. And so when youth are ideating, when they're looking at problems they want to solve, even before they're doing customer discovery and market validation, it's vital that they're getting an idea out into the world that they're uniquely suited to solve, their background, where they come from. And that has totally allowed me to rebuild working with students in our second year, the capstone program, front loading the first weeks to just be about culture, to just, live those Brene Brown statements, about vulnerability, about living your values, about naming your values. That like cohort culture creation and individual confidence is at the core of both.
I think you're on mute, Julie.
There's a lot of education that is, I talk to students a lot about, and to faculty a lot about creating the learning environments and relationships that are necessary in order for students to take risks in their learning. And until they're taking risks in their learning, they aren't actually learning, you know? If they're staying in their comfort zone of what they already know that they're good at and are able to do, then that's not really learning. So how do you create a space in which, you know, students can feel safe to make mistakes, to try things that they've never tried before, to screw up, to fail, you know, dreaded F word, and, you know, to get back up. And create that dynamic in which peers are encouraging other peers to do that, as well as the mentor relationships. Do you have anything that you feel that you do either at HPA or at Nalukai to help build that kind of environment for the students?
Yeah, I mean, school colonizes how you think about education and learning, for the most part, in real negative ways. No matter where you are, even in places that are super progressive. And so you have to decolonize that space. And so, you know, before I was the capstone coordinator, I was teaching a digital journalism class. And some of the students that struggled the most were students that knew how to get through school. They knew how to game school. And when I asked them to do things they were not good at, like interview people or engage with human beings, for some of them, it was really hard. And there was a ton of pushback. But those were students that completely thrived by the end of that experience. I had other students who were C students, C and D students, and who thrived instantly when they were given agency and autonomy to be able to run the school's Twitter account or build social media strategies for the institution. They found this love of marketing or storytelling. I think once you get them confident, once you get them to trust people in their cohort, it's so much easier to do this work. And so I've leaned heavily on Sydney Wicking, who comes from CTI. I've leaned heavily on other kind of wizards in that space, David Clark, who's like the greatest facilitator in the history of mankind. And I front load that in the beginning of the year. Sometimes you have to summer camp it, right? Like sometimes you have to get people to be joyful and to enjoy the experience. And then when you truly live Makahana Ki'ike, when they get those minimum viable products, those MVPs of their idea out into the world, and they see how real it is, and they see the impact that they make, not just in terms of likes or in terms of people following their Instagram account, but when they actually see what they're doing impacting, that's like catnip for the entire cohort of people. And, you know, removing that fake wall between school and the real world, you know, when light kind of beams in, then it's so much easier to do this work. And mentors make that really, really easy. I'll give you a quick anecdote. When I was doing digital journalism, we would look at the Pew Report State of the Media to look at data on what current kind of media creation, you know, tips there were. And we would look and see that after 110 seconds, people stop watching video. So I told my students in that class, front load great content to keep a user in. They did not listen to me. Then I brought in a really good friend of mine who at the time was a war and conflict videographer and had done 2 tours across Ebola-stricken West Africa. I don't know if you remember when Ebola really hit that region of the world, and had embedded himself with the Lord's Resistance Army in the Congo. And, you know, students watched this really tough footage. They saw his creative process, and then he spoke to them. And without me prompting, he said the same thing. Front load content that gets a reader interested or a viewer interested early on. And who do you think they listened to? They absolutely listened to him because he was real, because he was doing the work, because he was on the front lines of videography, of storytelling. And so that has to happen multiple times in a program. You have to bring in people doing that real work, subject matter experts. And that's going to allow someone to feel like they're worthy when that person is talking to them or retweeting their content or connecting with them.
want to take a second and just allow Shireen has joined us. Are you able to go off mute for a minute and just introduce yourself to Erin Schorn?
Hi, Erin. My name is Shireen. I work for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs as a research analyst. My focus is education.
Nice to meet you, Shireen. Aloha.
Thank you. All right, I want to open it up to questions. And then I always have more questions, you know, so, but I don't want to dominate this by a long shot.
So it's hard because I can't see the other folks, so I'll just jump in, I guess. First of all, I wanted to say that Stephen is actually hoping to get here. He's trying to get off another meeting, so he may join us, but I was like, everything you just said, I was like, oh no, but it is recorded because I was like, oh no, we need to hear that because all that backstory. But it is recorded, so I'll let him hear. But one of my kind of the first thing that jumps to my mind is like, I love hearing the language decolonizing education. And I wonder if should we wait, Erin?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting my wife is on residential life duty, so I'm just having my daughter turn something on for my son, which is just next level Netflix parenting.
Hey, we know how
One
it goes.
second, sorry.
Yeah, we'll just pause.
Mahalo for your patience.
No problem at all. We're grateful to have your time. So
I am ready to go.
okay. So my question is really just like, for example, hearing you say decolonizing education, I mean, that's music to my ears. It's something that startles a lot of people and they, you know, kind of go, what are you talking about? And or how dare you say that about education? And even this, the whole idea of bringing in subject matter experts. I'm just curious how your colleagues react to some of the work that you're doing, and knowing that you are kind of a standalone program, and so maybe it almost doesn't matter what your colleagues are doing, that you as running the capstone program. But I'm also wondering if you're kind of rocking the boat, or if people are rocking with you and thinking, yeah, this is where we need to be headed, or are they resistant, thinking, you know, we run our classes, I know what my students need to know. Just curious what kind of feedback you're getting from colleagues.
So thank you for the question. The capstones in 5th, 8th, and 12th are a strategic initiative for HPA. They came from a previous a director of studies. The board believes in them. And that doesn't mean that it's across the whole school, but it was nice to have that, right? And I made the decision early on that all seniors would do this capstone course. It's not a part of their advisory. It is one of their courses, right? Okay. And I felt strongly that there needs to be teachers, capstone teachers across the space. And so what I did working with others is I created a structure, a playbook, a handbook that every senior would follow. Key milestones, key deliverables, with tons of spaces for iteration. And I really struggle with like independent programs, or like just a student doing something by themselves, in working by themselves. And so I worked to have teachers design 10 different senior capstone courses. And what those courses are actually just themes. They are themes for ideation that make ideation a lot easier. Biotechnology, agriculture and design, art, community and culture, migrations of Moana Nui Akea, Hawaiian voyaging, and like 7 others, right? And I created a application that really reinforced what a capstone was, and basically created a badass PLC, a professional learning community where these capstone teachers were super, super passionate about what they were teaching. They had the skills and capacity and the network to have students ideate and create products within those themes. And so that means that I have a cohort of 11 teachers, a boss, Amy Cole, Dr. Amy Cole, a Dean of Studies, and so many other teachers that believe in this work and are willing to get involved. And then as I try to make it 9, 10, and 11, as I go to department heads and I take our learning targets and our key product rubric, and I ask them to turn it into an English department kind of sequence and scope to get to 12th grade. And I do that with fine arts, and I do that with modern language. I get it to be the identity of the entire institution.
Okay.
And so I'm exceptionally fortunate at HPA to, though sometimes it's hard for me to see it for myself, right? To have this much time devoted to capstones, to have teaching lines devoted to capstones. But everything goes back to the culture. You know, any change within an organization or institution, you have to kind of have to address, attack, or rebuild or build upon a culture. But I mean, we live on the Big Island. Like I'm in Waimea, you know, with Lai, this incredible pu'u behind me, you know, with this powerful history and spirituality. It makes that work so much easier having people, you know, that have spent generations here. And when we root our programs, you know, in sense of place, when we root them in who came before us, it becomes much more relevant and purposeful.
Agreed.
But I also work at a private school.
Yeah.
And private schools, you know, are forces of segregation. Private schools pull resources and people and parents from public institutions. Acknowledging that is why a lot of my work is in Nalukai, right? And so it's this duality, this hypocrisy that we find ourselves in. Anyone in the, they say independent schools, so they don't have to say private schools.
Right.
Anyone in that space is going to find themselves in, right? And so it's powerful to think about that. Pua, when we were building this product rubric out, said there has to be a section on impact, right? We had like presentation, product development, project management, ideation, research with all these I can statements. But Pua felt very strongly that we had to have impact, that we had to have youth understanding the impact of their work on themselves, but also their communities. And so I think that keeps me in this space too.
Yeah, I know that contradiction. Can you explain who Pua is?
Yeah, I mean, everyone, just if you gain anything from this call, Pualani Lincoln is the greatest educator in the history of the world. Pua works at Pua.
I know who that person is then.
Pua is a navigator. Pua works also at Nakalewa'a. Her and her husband help to work on and restore Makali'i, the voyaging canoe. Pua is the heart and soul of everything I do. My job as capstone coordinator is just to get things out of her way. And so, you know, it's people like her and so many others that my work and vision is built upon. And so whatever I can do to help them in their work and endeavors. The greatest compliment I was ever given was by David Clark, who knows Pua well. And he said last year at the end of these capstone showcases, he said, "You've helped to create a structure that gets Pua's ideas out into the world." So my capstone was that capstone program. My capstone was creating something that allowed this innate, powerful Hawaiian educator to be able to manifest her vision, right, with her cohort of students. And that is the single best compliment I've been given.
And can I just ask, does she have a formal role at HPA as well, or she's a community person?
She's running our Hawaiian studies program. She's teaching these incredible courses. She teaches the migrations of Moana Nui at Kea Capstone. She's an advisor. She's an HPA graduate. And she's just a force to be reckoned with.
Meet her someday. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that too, that when I talk about decolonizing education, because part of my doctoral degree was a course looking at how education had been used across the world, right? as a colonizing effort. And it almost like takes what you're talking about, Erin, and puts it in reverse. You're taking people away from the kapuna, away from the land, and putting them into a school, a building with walls, and determining what they can learn, how they can learn, and from whom they can learn information. And so when we go back to this idea of you learn by doing, that's really not what colonization. It was you learn by reading, you learn by writing, you learn by, talking. You don't follow a kapuna and watch them and learn from them and do it and practice until you get it. That's kind of the opposite. So when I think of decolonization, it's taking education and connecting it back to place and community, and have students be doing things with them. It's honoring, the knowledge of the community, not just the people with PhDs, since I'm in higher education, and that kind of book knowledge that came with colonization.
I mean, mine is the kingdom of literacy. That is a quote from a Hawaiian king, right? The printing press. I mean, the monarchs of Hawaii firmly believed in education in all its forms, right? And so, what colonization did was, and even including Kamehameha and its resources, right, was it tried to take that away. It tried to put forth kind of a Western narrative that allowed for kind of the pillage and rape of Hawaii, right? And that's what we see in New Zealand. That's what we see time and time again. And so my job is to know when to step out of the way as a bearded white man, and to create amplification for others' work that need to be in that space. And I think that's always an interesting venture. It's always an interesting thing. Because as humble as I pretend to be, like a lot of educators, I'm still ego-driven too. And so it's really powerful to be able to build platforms for others to be able to get their work out. And to build curriculum with people that represent that space, right? It's one thing I think what happens a lot in Hawaii is we tokenify things, and people feel that, as opposed to having people who are really from here or have spent generations here or of Hawaii or Hawaiian building that curriculum, building the foundation of this work too. And I think it's important to think about that. Says the woke, white male educator.
On that note, can I ask how long you've been in Hawaii? Did you grow up here, or is this?
No, I'm married into Hawaii. I'm married. My wife's from Mililani. She's born in Hilo, but she grew up in Mililani and kind of was struggling in middle school, and parents took out a second mortgage and sent her to HPA in Waimea, and it changed her life. And I met her in Haifa. We were both working at a place called the Baha'i World Center. And we moved to DC for her to get her master's at GW in international development and education. And when we had our daughter Alea in DC, she said, we're moving to Hawaii. So we really struggled on Oahu. And then I've just been following her my whole professional career.
Yeah.
I'm married way out of my league. And so she got a job at HPA, and I followed. And I've been here for 8 years, but it's not really until the last 2 that I've made an effort to assimilate to Hawaii, to start to learn the language, to start to understand its history, to fall in love with its people, to truly do the work that's necessary to live here in Hawaii. To have breath, if you will, to have ha. And so I don't know what took me so long. I think maybe the bubble of HPA. I think it's interesting. I grew up in Lesotho the first 7 years of my life in Southern Africa, and that's really impacted me. But it took me a while to understand the power and spirituality of where I live. Just as a random side note.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, you must have had some kind of not average upbringing if you were interested, if you were going to go to Howard for college. So I figured there was some non-normal, non-typical path for.
I grew up a third culture kid. I grew up a global citizen. And that was really beneficial, you know.
Mhm.
And I think it's helped me a lot as an educator and as kind of an operations and systems creator here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to pause and just see if Camilla or Shireen have any questions before the next. I have another one.
Whole beginning part, so I'm a little behind. I'm looking forward to watching the recording though.
It's okay, Shireen. So Erin does the capstone courses at HBA and also was part of the creation of Nalukai. And so we're just kind of talking about the purpose, the meaning, the relevance of education and that approach to education. So since you mentioned the fact that you're at a private school, I guess one of the things I struggle with a lot is, you know, coming back to this situation that this group is in as a community organization, collective impact. How do we take these concepts, or, you know, what an organization like this can do to move it out of a private realm and into, over time, the culture of every school?
I mean, I think it's already happening. You know, when you look at Matthew Williams at Kealakehe Middle School, when you look at Justin Brown at Kealakehe High School, so many incredible educators across these islands. I think that this work is occurring in the public space. I would argue it's in some public spaces, it's happening better than private spaces. And then when you look at Halakumana, this incredible Hawaiian charter school, I think created by Kalo. When you look at some of the cool things that Taffy Wise and others are doing at Kanu Oka'aina here in Waimea, I think this work occurs. I'm interested in collaboration. I'm interested in the learning lessons from Nalukai. I have this vision of a product, right? You pair 4 schools together, they do 4 things really well, and students are working on some kind of, you know, entrepreneurial venture paired with mentors from industry, paired with funding from Hawaii Community Foundation and Kamehameha and other key stakeholders, and they're partnering together. And the learning lessons from distance learning, where people have internet access, are that you can do this synchronously and asynchronously. You can use incredible tools like Unruler, which is like the single coolest education tool I've ever utilized, and one that I think has insane and immense potential. It allows you to kind of document a learning community, UNRULR.
Say that again.
UNRULR. It makes learning visible. It makes it trust-based. It basically creates a feed where you can create tags for youth and students and communities. I mean, I could just talk about Unruler for this entire call, but that would allow any institution to partner with others, right? And partner with key stakeholders. I come from a background in international development, and projects that were successful in countries were ones where there were different key stakeholders: the organization, the institution funding it, the government of the country, and then most importantly, the population. And so some people say that's too many cooks in the kitchen. They may be right, but that's where a lot of successful international development projects occurred globally. And when I look at Hawaii, and when I look at hopefully some of the sea change that will occur post-COVID, I think getting different sectors of Hawaii's economy and education to partner and prototypes with each other across public, private, and charter is really, really interesting to me. Yeah, I mean, I'm jaded. Like, you know, I've engaged with the Hawaii business community many times, whether it's speaking at Hawaii executive conferences or trying to partner through Nalukai and HPA. And there's a lot of lip service. There is a lot of lip service to providing opportunities for youth. And I'm waiting for it to really occur. And I think the world of people like Micah Kane, who run Hawaii Community Foundation, and so many others, and I'm hoping that, you know, these ventures and these opportunities can be funded by those organizations too. I mean, there's somewhat, Hokupa'a, like OHA, there's just so many beautiful spaces that can find something to collaborate on, right? That idea of a minimum viable product, that idea of one thing with 10 students. I'm a big believer in if you build it, they will come. If you showcase the power of youth innovation, if you showcase the power of what youth can do now and not in the future, then I think that it's really hard to deny it. And I think when you get smaller versions of big ideas out, it creates this forest fire in a positive way. Maybe a bad analogy.
I was gonna say, as someone who recently left Northern,
Right.
Yeah, someone who just recently left Northern California, let's not talk about forest fires, please.
Shireen, what do you do at OHA?
Still on? Shireen, are you there? She might have had to step away.
Yeah. And Camilla, how would you describe your work? I think that gives me a better idea of, who I'm talking to too.
Oh no, the dreaded question. You may have worked with one of my predecessors, maybe Sandy or Kaylin. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not, but someone else in my organization might have.
Oh, okay. So I try very hard to follow in their large footsteps, but Kaylin came from UH Hilo and then moved into the co-center as director. And Sandy came from the Department of Education in West Hawaii, the community engagement team. So they both had very strong network backgrounds and coming from within the education system. I came on as a student intern doing a little pilot project with some students one summer, and then stayed on as a contractor to do a little research project. And now as the program coordinator, trying to build these networks. I reach out a lot to anytime I hear anyone is doing something interesting or anyone that seems like what they're doing is something I would want to latch onto.
Awesome.
Really cool. Let me try to bring more people in. So coming into my intention, the transformational learning space is to, of course, be connected with partners that care about changing systems, that care about connecting different sectors and listening to different sectors, and finding ideas on where are the points where you can begin to. I think we had former complex area superintendent Art Souza come and talk to us once last year, and he described changing the system as trying to steer a large ship. So we as a very small group, try to do what we can to find ways, what's the, I don't want to say easiest way, but what's maybe the most effective way where we can act within our powers to start turning the boat, and then hopefully it will continue. But understanding that it's a big task, and sometimes you have to try a few things and then figure out what's going to be most effective. That's kind of where I'm at.
It's awesome. It sounds like a really cool job.
In joining the original question, but
no, you
yeah,
totally
kind
did.
of, we have a lot of conversations with people like you where they're already doing kind of transformational work, and we want to bring them in, talk to them, and then try to think, what can we pull out of that to put into trying to change the system as a whole.
Sure.
Even if the way that looks to begin with is just doing small little projects like what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And hoping.
Thank you.
One of the things that Vibrant Hawaii, does as well. So this is one stream of a larger education stream. And, earlier today, there was a meeting on how we can contribute to the SEDS, the county economic development strategy. And meeting with council members and working to put together how we request funding for different concepts that move education. And a lot of what, you know, a lot of what the overlap was between concepts coming from the different substreams and different areas of Vibrant Hawaii was really about networking in a way. It was about connecting people together and how you do that across different areas of not just geographic, but interest areas across the island. So I think that's what we're seeing, right? Is that educators can't work by themselves and change education. You have to bring people in from as mentors and connect them to people working in different fields, and in order to really have the students figure out what they're passionate about and what they want to learn more about, and, you know, connect to.
I think, you know, I think a lot about metrics of success from, especially with Nalukai, right? And so a metric of success is not an elite school that a student goes to post Nalukai. A metric of success for us is what they do when they come back here or when they stay here, right? And so some of our most quote unquote successful Nalukai alums go to community colleges in Hawaii, start their own marketing services in Hawaii, join the beginning and emerging startup scene on Oahu. I think of Trinity Singh, a Kamehameha Schools graduate who has this love of social media and marketing, creates a business idea, a startup idea that we tell her if it grows post Nalukai, great. If it doesn't, you've had this insane experience and you have this network. Trinity, when we were partnered with Purple Prize that year, becomes a Purple Prize fellow. She joins a team that was in their cohort. She has so much value, she becomes a co-founder in that company, Malcolm Market. Trinity now is a co-founder, right? Like that pathway is about network, right? That pathway is about connection. And I think that we romanticize mindsets and we romanticize the word entrepreneurship as opposed to understanding that you have to give someone a tool. You have to give them a computer, a mobile phone. You have to ensure they have internet access. You have to ensure that they can work in a space that isn't crowded. You have to give them that opportunity, and you have to fund them. You have to find mentors. You have to help them pay for college. You have to give them things that they did not have, right? And if you don't do that, then it's all lip service again. If you say, well, now I've given that person a growth mindset and I gave them Lean Startup by Eric Ries, they're on their way, right? But if you look at like examples of what Da Vinci schools did in LA, where they saw their graduates, even after going through a great high school, not being able to graduate from college because of the socioeconomic realities, they created their own university and had their students go through it. Like you have to fund, you have to give opportunity to people. And it doesn't mean that you have to, I don't know, it's that weird there can still be bootstraps. People can still pull themselves up, but they need boots, right? And so I think that that's really important to think about across Hawaii and these islands. I had this incredible conversation with Mahina Duterte, who created Vai Collective, and it's just like one of the most powerful people in the world. And she talks a lot about trauma and healing. And I think that we forget about that in the populations we work with. You know, when you think about like what communities have gone through, what ancestrally, or just like what people have gone through on a day-to-day basis, we have to create spaces for them to work and understand the trauma that they've gone through or that their parents have. And I think that's a part of allowing for growth and success too.
It's funny, I just read this article about grit, and they were saying that we tend to romanticize grit
Sure.
You know, we don't realize really how many of our students, the only reason they're there is because they already have grit. Like they're overcoming, you know, all of these things just in order to be in an educational setting. So they don't necessarily need to learn more about grit. I thought that was an interesting perspective.
Mm.
Can you say a little bit more about Nalukai? I remembered reading about it because David Clark joined our education stream at some point, and I remember looking into and learning more about that then. But I've forgotten, how do students get into that? Is it just, and what are the ages? Like what point are you trying for the actual boarding program, and who are you targeting? And
Rising ninth to graduating seniors.
oh, really? Okay, that big.
Yeah, and we usually want a third between public, private, and charter, a third of each.
Okay.
I mean, I'll be sending you information about how students can apply to Nalukai right after this call. If anyone's listening to this, go to nalukai.org and have a student apply. It's a really interesting application. We've had students that have gotten and that haven't, that have just gained a ton from applying. It's a lot about qualitative and quantitative data and information. And there's a strong section about providing evidence of learning and evidence of work that you've done or accomplished. And we work with institutions, we work with students. There really isn't a profile of exactly who we want, because cultural understanding and understanding of sense of place are just as important to us as coding skills or videography skills. What we strive to do is to create a cohort every year that is incredibly skills diverse, and then pair those kids together. Either they self-pair or we help them pair, and they become kind of entrepreneurship teams. They become teams that are trying to solve problems that are meaningful to them. Applications for Nalukai, which will be virtual this year, are open. They close May 1st. And some remarkable things happened virtually. And it opened up a lot of new doors for us. But we're at our heart boarding and in person, getting youth from across the islands to be together, to build these really powerful relationships that sustain well after the 2 weeks, is really what makes our program special. It's humanity and it's authenticity. That's at the core of what we do at Nalukai and at HPA too.
Okay. But it will be virtual this year.
Yeah, I mean, we just, having that clarity is really simple from the get-go. Ensuring that every participant has a new computer that needs it, ensuring that every participant, no matter where they are, has internet access. That's what's vital for us. And having pre-work before it all begins, that gets them to really dive into DEI and SEL is going to be really important for us this year. I mean, this is our, I think, 5th or 6th year doing it. There are manifold learning lessons every year, from like how we attack customer discovery and market validation, or how do students create teams together, or how do we root this in, the culture and science of Hawaii. Every year, there's some really powerful, beautiful learning lessons.
Nice.
It's, I forget who said it, but like where you spend your time is where you show your values, right? I noticed that at Nalukai, I was working with students for more hours over 2 weeks than I was with HPA students over an entire year, because of all the other classes they have to take, right? And what we've determined where our time is at Nalukai really showcases our values. We have it mapped out. I could, maybe not on this call, but I can tell you the percentage of time that's spent on project management versus, other things. I can tell you what roots, Nalukai's curriculum and implementation. Understanding that is a really powerful way of iterating and getting better too.
I totally want to go.
So do I. That's why I helped create it.
Yeah.
It is. I'm just slightly over the age range. I don't know.
And all the mentors and facilitators that work with us, they say to our cohort, do you understand? Like, if I had this at 15, 16, 17, or 18, what I could have done,
Yeah.
right? If I had this network, if I had this community, if I had some of these learning lessons, if I had the belief in myself, you know, what I could have done. And it's important for them to hear that. Youth suck at understanding how special they are. They suck at understanding how powerful they are. Even the entitled ones, even the ones that are just dripping with privilege. There's so much of a lack of belief. And I mean, that's a gross generalization. There's tons of examples where that doesn't occur. But like, that's probably the hardest part about what we do, is to get that confidence, you know, to get them to understand how powerful they are or their network is, right? And those were the big learning lessons of Nalukai. We started as like a Y Combinator for youth, a tech startup here in Hawaii. We have turned into a social and cultural entrepreneurial organization, because that is what our cohort wants. And that's how they thrive, right? And it's been powerful to think of that. It's not pitch day anymore. It's a showcase of learning. It's an authentic story, right? And so I think it's powerful to get them to believe in themselves. There was a student who you would think has all the confidence in the world a couple of years ago, and just was totally disengaged the first couple days. And then we had this product developer at Twitch Zoom in and talk about his work, and talked about communication and strategy and storytelling and all the work that he does to build a team. And then that student started crying. He lit up. He felt purposeful. You know, he took us all outside, and because he's an incredible navigator, showed us all of the stars. For the last 8 days, he owned this experience, and it was because he saw himself. He saw himself in the facilitators. He saw himself in the mentors. He saw himself as being worthy in this work. And so that's what we have to do first before anything else. Even if there isn't a big shiny product at the end, just getting that confidence in is the biggest piece.
Do you think that's specific to, young people in general? Or I feel like we talk a lot about here in Hawaii that because our kids have a little bit of a inferiority complex growing up, especially on an outer island, but also growing up in a culture of humility. One of the things that I find that I work with students a lot is how to tell their story. Like, we call it interviewing skills, but interviewing skills are telling your story, right? In a way that doesn't feel inauthentic, that feels like you, but not bragging, not inappropriate, not, these things that our kids grow up to see as negative and bad.
I think there's cultural components to it. I mean, I'm a loud white man, who my wife has to kick me under the table to create equity of voice for others, right? Like my wife's Hapa Korean. She grew up on Oahu, and she kind of lives that kind of humbleness, but she has innate confidence too. I mean, I don't know. I think it's different. I've made some big generalization statements, but like, I think there's part of that that's true. But I think I mean, this is a culture and history of storytelling here in Hawaii, and so when you create a platform and a curriculum that meets them, where they are culturally, that's how they tell their story. If we create a Western paradigm of how they're supposed to tell their story, then it is inauthentic to tell a story like that, right? That's what's so, it's the one time I'll swear, fucked up about the college application process, right? Is that it isn't rooted in the culture of so many people around the world. It's rooted in one. And so I think that you have to, you have to change structures too. You have to rage against the machine it a little bit, and create new ways of youth to brag about themselves or tell their stories or showcase their work or their learning. And that's what's exciting about Nalukai for me, and kind of some of the stuff we're embarking on at HPA too. What's scary to me is that no matter what we do in high school, right? Sometimes we're setting kids up to fail if we're deeply progressive and we create incredible systems in high school. Because unless they're going to Olin or they're going to other really cool schools, they're going right back into the same system that is not progressive high school education. And so how do we disrupt that, right? There's stuff like the Mix, MYX, that's coming out, kind of trying to disrupt the college path. David Dunbar and a bunch of others who are incredible educators and entrepreneurs are doing it. There's Minerva, there's Lambda, there's other spaces like that. There's cool stuff happening at Stanford and project-based stuff that comes out of IDEO, but that's not the reality, right? Like, I remember going to the Capstone Consortium conference, probably the best PD I've ever done. And they brought together this panel of admissions officers at like Brown, at Bucknell, Tufts, you know, that kind of classic, really expensive, quote unquote, good school. And they're like, capstone work is incredible. You guys are on the forefront of learning. And then someone raised their hand and they're like, we don't see it on any of your websites. So our students would rather take APs than do capstone work or deeper learning or 21st century skills or the 400 other buzzwords we use, right? And they're like, yeah, but like, you know, just keep doing it. And then we were like, can you put it on your websites? And they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And so like, there's this disconnect, right? Same thing happens in industry. We want to provide youth with opportunities. Okay, hire them right out of high school. Yeah, we're looking for that college degree. Like, that's the space, you know, that we all have to be attacking. That's the space that we have to try to disrupt. And so, you know, that's something I struggle with when I think about the work that I do. Some of the students that have community college experience are much more successful in my mind than ones that are indebted after 4 years at like a private school.
You raised the phrase AP. What is and I know that's a constant thing that Stephen, who's not here, butts up against constantly, is the supposed value of AP classes. I'm just curious, has HPA eliminated AP classes, or do they still have them? And
I mean, I think when you're a school like Thatcher, you can eliminate APs. Like when you're a school that has a clear understanding, you can do whatever you want, right? Like Thatcher has a huge endowment. They have kind of a really solid identity. When you are HPA, Iolani, Midpack, Punahou, Parker, Loomis Chaffee, Windsor, you know, you're still reliant on APs. What I've come to realize is it's not either or. There are good APs, right? So like I'm getting away from the word entrepreneurship and I'm honing in on the word craftsman, skill building, right? Because if you create this entrepreneurship space and students don't have skills, what are you doing? If they don't have video editing and you're just going to have them create a video, like that doesn't help them. If they're not strong writers and communicators, how are they going to write for social media or the digital world? And so there are some APs, especially in the Englishes, that build some of those out, right? AP Comparative Gov, what's that sophomore AP Social Studies? You know, there's a couple that do service, and then there's others that don't. Most of APs are kind of bourgeoisie, teach for the test, right? AP US History. Can we go over anything? No. Right? But there are AP Physics, there's others that really do aid in the skill development of a learner and demand work from those spaces. And so I don't think everyone has to go the high-tech high route. You know, I don't think everyone has to go another route too. I think you can mix and match. You just have to be able to capture the learning, right? I'm fascinated in the failure of the mastery transcript. I'm fascinated that more has not been done. I think it's a brilliant idea. Where is it? How many years have people been talking about the mastery transcript? Like, I don't see it across institutions yet. To me, like, I mean, failure is a strong word, but like, that's something I think is incredible, but I don't see it lived in institutions, you know? And I think that, you know, I think that schools have to take what makes them powerful. You know, they have to take their core values. They have to take what programs they do really well and use those as a base for kind of everything else.
I was going to say, I hadn't heard that the master transcript failed. So,
and I, you know, I mean,
it has, but I don't know. I know Nuevo was part of the founding group of that. And
I think like, where is it? Like,
yeah, I don't
you know, it's a program, it's an initiative, but like, you know, where is it? I think Nueva is a great example of understanding who it is.
Right.
Nueva has an identity. I was blown away with the student agency that I saw there, right? When I asked them questions about Capstone, how they partnered students with mentors, how they've taken the lessons of mastery transcript, right, and turned it into their profiles of a graduate or turned it into their rubrics. I was like, oh my God, you are light years ahead of anything I've thought of, right? Same thing with Da Vinci schools. But, you know, the college application process is still the same, right? You know, how graduates from different institutions try to work with universities is still pretty much the same across the board. And so I guess I just want to see things happen faster. I'm impatient.
Yeah, I guess you. Yeah.
With things like the mastery transcript, with other big initiatives,
Mhm.
right? I'm impatient to see it spread faster.
Mhm.
And so it's great that people like Ted Dinter-Smith are doing this work. It's great that others are in that space too, but it's happening in too few places.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Agreed. Which is kind of our challenge, I guess, is how we build out those spaces for people who are interested in it to connect, and then given the support and tools they need to implement what they want to implement. So I'm gonna ask kind of a final question, but let me
Sure.
see if anybody has anything before I do that. Anybody have any questions or?
It's very strange to not be able to see or yeah.
How come you can't see, Sherry?
Well, I can't see Camilla and Shireen. That's all. I was just, to know, usually we see everybody and we know if we're all, so just.
I'm still here.
Yeah, okay. It's just that pause, just to wait and make sure that you're.
I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I haven't drowned yet. With all this rain, I have not drowned yet.
Oh gosh.
Floated away.
Good. Oh my goodness.
Good. So I'm just, I guess, if there were, one or two things that you could see happen here on the Big Island in education, what would it be?
I think collaboration between institutions is huge. I think that we have, Sherry, I haven't met your husband, but I've heard incredible things. And the fact that he's coming from Nueva makes me really excited about, what he can do at Parker. And your background makes me really excited that you're on this island too. When I think about who runs Kanu Oka'aina, when I think about Hala Kumana, when I think about, Doug McDowell at Honoka'a High School, when I think about all these people that are right here, like that makes me feel powerful. It's always time, right? It's like, it's just getting us to have the headspace to be able to do it. And it's always funding. I mean, I think there's so much coastal wealth. There's so many people that come in, right? New money and old money, and getting them to, lovingly shaming them to get the, to put forth space and time, whether it's Mark Benioff, who's, the Salesforce dude, or whether it's Zuckerberg on Kauai, like getting them to understand the power of these initiatives, not just Nalukai, but everything that we're doing. I think it's something that's needed and necessary. And getting people to talk and work with each other. I get really excited about stuff like Unruler that allows for that collaboration to occur. I had a former student of mine create Student Corner, which was like a kind of a portfolio space for students. He saw the need in his capstone. George Donev, who's at UH Hilo, I believe. That gets me really excited. Creating spaces that allow for decentralized learning across our islands. It's really easy to do diversity. It's really easy to do, it's a little harder to do inclusion, and it's really hard to do equity. And so thinking about equity, you know, thinking about what our DOE and public school systems have gone through in distance learning, we're going to be living with those ramifications for a while. And so that's a world that I'm not in. 1 second, Kaino. That's a world that I'm not in. And so it's getting people that are there to be able to provide resources to those that have been forgotten or have kind of fallen out of formal education too. Says the guy who works at a private school.
I can tell you from my son's experience, he's just kind of checked out, right? He's in public school, 5th grade. He's just kind of like, I'm not interested. I don't care. This is not sparking anything in me whatsoever. So, and that's hard to watch. So what do we, I completely disagree with the conversations about, you know, catching up and learning loss and things like that. It's how do we re-engage students in being curious and discovering and
there's a, you know, that one answer. Honolulu Family Magazine reached out to me about writing an article during kind of the distance learning in May. And I talked about this one ideation exercise I do called Head, Heart, and Purpose. And it's a big Venn diagram on like a giant sheet of butcher paper. And, you know, heart is on one, head is on the other, and purpose is that middle part. And this is how we do easy ideation in the very beginning. So in heart, there's a bunch of prompts, but you're writing down all the things you're passionate about, all the things that give your life meaning, all the things you love, your favorite, the community you love to be in, also the things that make you mad, the things that you want to try to solve. And then in head, you write down the skills you have, the skills you want to learn, the access you have, the network that you have, regardless of who you are and where you come from. There's a bunch of other prompts. And in purpose, you try to connect the two. You try to find ideas, products, spaces. You try to fill that up with as many as you can, right? That is an activity that my daughter, who is in 3rd grade, can do. That is an activity that a middle schooler can do, and that is an activity that a high schooler can do. And if we do that as family members, if I do that and we do it as a family, we can create service projects together. We can think about ways in which we can institute it. At HPA, that is the touch point for ideation that we utilize, just that exercise. I did it with juniors this year because I want to hit them with that culture earlier on before they're seniors, right? I do it over and over and over again. See, you do have value. See, this is what you can do, right? And so for students, no matter where you've grown up, there's so much that they can try to fill that in with. And when they can't, it's a great way for you to partner with them in it. I think that's something that we can do right now with our children, with our students, with our communities, even organizationally. And so I think just rooting the work we do in who we are and what our innate superpowers are, right? I think that's something that we have to do in this time of global pandemic.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
I want to close out. So I really appreciate your time sharing with us and giving us some inspiration and ideas in what we work on and invest in moving forward.
I want to thank you for your work, each and every one of you. And I'm excited to connect with each of you and learn more about what you do. And it's very cathartic to meet other people that believe in this mission, and you know, you set forth all the things that make my work possible too.
Thank you. All right, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your week. Let's hope we get a little bit of sunshine out there, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks again.
Such a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Aaron.
Look forward to getting to know you more.
Absolutely.
Aloha.
Aloha.